Chosen one. They thought hiding those secret conversations about you would keep their manipulation campaign in the shadows forever, whispering poison into every ear they could reach, while you remained oblivious to their coordinated attack. But every lie they told, every secret they shared, every person they recruited to tear you down was building toward the most spectacular public exposure and karmic destruction you've ever witnessed. The very secrecy they relied on to protect their scheme has become the catalyst for their complete annihilation, and now they're facing the kind of public scrutiny and karmic crisis that will make them wish they'd never learned your name. Think of this person, let's call them the architect. They've been watching you for months, maybe years. They've studied your relationships, your patterns, your vulnerabilities, not because they love you, but because they fear what you represent, and they're not working alone. The architect knew exactly who to call first. That friend who's always been a little insecure, the family member who questions everything, the colleague who loves gossip just a little too much. They had a whole list, and you'll discover soon just how extensive their network really was. They positioned themselves as the concerned friend, the wise counsel, the person who just wants what's best for everyone. And this is where it gets truly sinister, because they were getting paid for some of these calls. Each conversation was a masterpiece of manipulation. They'd share just enough truth to seem credible, then weave in the poison. They'd ask innocent questions that planted doubt. They'd share observations that reframed your strengths as weaknesses. Your confidence seems a bit arrogant lately. Your success, wonder if they're being honest about how they got there. Your spiritual growth, getting a little too deep, don't you think? The architect made sure every conversation ended the same way. Just keep this between us. I don't want to cause drama. That phrase alone should have been a red flag, because what's coming will show you just how many people heard those exact words. Meanwhile, they were documenting everything, screenshots of your social media posts, details about your daily routines, information about your work projects and personal relationships. They weren't just gossiping about you, they were conducting surveillance. One conversation became two, two became five, five became a web that stretched further than you could have imagined. And the shocking truth about how many people were involved will leave you speechless. The people in your circle started comparing notes without realizing they were being played. The architect had given each person slightly different information, different concerns, different reasons to worry about you. They were running multiple storylines simultaneously, like a twisted soap opera where you were the unwilling star. Your best friend started noticing how you never really listened during conversations. Your coworker began questioning whether you really deserved that promotion. Your family member started wondering if you'd changed for the worse. Your neighbor started keeping track of your visitors. Yes, even your neighbor was recruited into this campaign. None of them realized they were all having the same thoughts because they were all receiving the same programming. The architect had created a psychological echo chamber where every doubt about you was amplified and reinforced. The beauty of the architect's plan was its invisibility. You couldn't point to any single conversation or incident. You couldn't prove anything concrete. You just felt the shift, the cooling of relationships, the subtle distance, the way people seemed to be waiting for you to mess up. Meanwhile, the architect positioned themselves as your biggest supporter in public. They'd defend you loudly when others criticized, creating the perfect cover for their private campaign. This dual role was crucial to their strategy, and it's about to become their biggest downfall. What you don't know yet is that some of these conversations were recorded, not by the architect, but by people who were starting to feel uncomfortable with what they were being asked to do. Evidence was building, and a reckoning was coming that would expose everything. As a chosen one, your spiritual antenna is finely tuned. You began picking up on the dissonance, even when you couldn't identify its source. Your energy field was detecting the psychic attacks being launched at you from multiple directions simultaneously. Conversations felt hollow. People's words didn't match their energy. Friends who used to seek your advice suddenly had better options. Family members who once celebrated your wins started focusing on your flaws. Colleagues who used to collaborate eagerly now seemed hesitant to work with you. You found yourself walking on eggshells, second-guessing your words, dimming your light to make others comfortable. The confident, powerful person you'd become started shrinking back into old patterns of people-pleasing and self-doubt. The architect watched this transformation with satisfaction. Their plan was working. Your light was dimming. Your confidence was shaking. Your relationships were fracturing. They thought they were winning. They made one critical miscalculation. They underestimated the power of divine protection that surrounds chosen ones like you. And they definitely didn't anticipate that their own allies would start turning against them. Your spiritual gifts were actually strengthening under pressure. Your intuition was getting sharper, not duller. Your ability to sense deception was becoming supernatural. You were developing an almost X-ray vision for people's true motivations, and soon you'd need it more than ever. The attacks weren't just social, they were energetic. The architect had recruited people who practiced certain spiritual disciplines, people who knew how to direct negative energy towards specific targets. You were under assault on multiple dimensions, and your body was feeling it. Unexplained fatigue, digestive issues, sleep disturbances. These weren't coincidences. What you didn't know was that money was changing hands in this operation. The architect wasn't just manipulating people out of jealousy, they were running a business. And when people discovered they'd been hired to destroy someone's reputation, the reaction was explosive. The architect had approached certain individuals with propositions. They'd positioned this as protective surveillance, claiming you were involved in something questionable and needed monitoring. Some people took the money, others refused but stayed quiet about the offer. A few pretended to go along while planning to expose the whole operation. The network was more complex than anyone realized, and when it fell apart, it fell hard. Bank records would later show payments to at least 7 different people over the course of 18 months. Small amounts, carefully spaced, designed to look like legitimate business transactions. The architect had created a paper trail that would eventually destroy them. One of the people they tried to recruit was actually a close friend of yours. Someone you'd never suspect was being approached. This person pretended to go along with the scheme while documenting everything. They were building a case, gathering evidence, preparing for the moment when they could bring down the entire operation. The money trail led to some shocking discoveries. The architect wasn't funding this campaign alone. They had a benefactor, someone with deeper pockets and darker motivations. The conspiracy reached higher than anyone imagined, and when it all came to light, the ripple effects would devastate multiple social circles. Truth has a way of surfacing, especially when someone gets greedy with their manipulation. The architect's success made them overconfident, and overconfidence breeds mistakes. They started making up stories, fabricating incidents, adding dramatic flair to their concerns about you. They told one person you'd borrowed money and never paid it back. They told another you'd been talking badly about them behind their back. They created an elaborate story about your questionable behavior at a recent gathering. The problem with lies is they require perfect memory and perfect coordination. The architect was running multiple narratives with multiple people, and eventually the stories started contradicting each other. Dates didn't match. Details shifted, witnesses to events that never happened. 2 of your friends compared notes by accident. The timeline didn't add up. The details didn't match. Questions started forming, and once people start questioning, they start remembering other inconsistencies. Someone pulled out their phone and showed a screenshot that contradicted what the architect had claimed. Another person remembered a conversation where the architect had revealed information they supposedly didn't have. The careful house of cards was starting to wobble. What the architect didn't realize was that one of their paid informants had been documenting everything, every phone call, every text message, every payment, every lie. The evidence was mounting, and soon it would all come crashing down in the most public way possible. The person gathering evidence wasn't just collecting random information, they were building a legal case, because what the architect was doing crossed the line from gossip into harassment, defamation, and possibly criminal conspiracy. The justice system was about to get involved. Once people started questioning, they started remembering how every negative story about you seemed to come from the same source, how the architect always seemed to know intimate details about situations they supposedly weren't involved in, how they always had just the right amount of concern mixed with just the right amount of doubt. Someone remembered the architect pumping them for information during that casual coffee date. Another person recalled how the architect had steered the conversation toward you during what was supposed to be a work meeting. A third person realized they'd been recruited as an unwitting spy and felt sick about their participation. The pattern became undeniable. Screenshots of messages were shared, voice recordings were remembered, call logs were examined, bank statements were reviewed. The careful documentation of the architect's campaign began to surface. Your friend group, your family, your colleagues, they all started to see how they'd been manipulated, how their genuine concerns had been weaponized, how their love for you had been twisted into suspicion, how they'd been turned into unwitting soldiers in someone else's war against you. The revelation was devastating for everyone involved. People who prided themselves on being good judges of character realized they'd been completely fooled. Individuals who considered themselves loyal friends discovered they'd been betraying someone they cared about. Family members who thought they were protecting you learned they'd been manipulated into attacking you. What made it worse was discovering how long it had been going on. The architect had been planting seeds for years, nurturing doubt, cultivating suspicion. Every relationship in your life had been contaminated to some degree. Every interaction had been influenced by their poison. The evidence wasn't just damning, it was overwhelming. Text messages spanning 3 years, financial records showing payments for information, recorded phone calls where the architect bragged about their manipulation tactics, email chains where they coordinated with their allies, social media posts that contradicted their public support of you. The revelation hit your circle like a shockwave, and what happened next was more intense than anyone expected. People who had distanced themselves from you suddenly understood why. Friends who had been questioning your character realized they'd been programmed to do so. Family members who had been worried about your changes saw how their natural protective instincts had been exploited. The anger was swift and fierce, not at you, at the architect, and at themselves for being so easily manipulated. The guilt was crushing for some people. They'd participated in the psychological destruction of someone they loved, and they'd done it willingly because they'd been fed lies. Your loved ones felt violated, used, manipulated into betraying someone they cared about. The guilt was overwhelming, and it quickly transformed into something else, a burning desire for justice. Meanwhile, the architect found themselves facing questions they couldn't answer. Why had they been so invested in monitoring your life? Where had all these detailed stories come from? Why did they always seem to be the source of concerning information about you? How did they know things that supposedly happened when they weren't around? Their carefully constructed image began to crumble. People started sharing their experiences with the architect's manipulation. Stories emerged of the architect trying to recruit them as informants. Evidence surfaced of the architect's obsession with you. The scope of their campaign became clear, and it was shocking. The architect had been conducting what amounted to a stalking operation. They knew your schedule, your habits, your social connections, your work projects, your family dynamics, your financial situation, your romantic interests. They'd been watching you like a full-time job, and people were horrified by the level of invasion you'd endured. What started as angry friends comparing notes quickly evolved into a community-wide investigation. People weren't just sharing their experiences, they were actively uncovering evidence. Your friends formed group chats dedicated to documenting the architect's lies. They created timelines showing the evolution of the campaign against you. They gathered screenshots, voice recordings, and witness statements. They were building a case that would have impressed professional investigators. The financial evidence was particularly damning. Bank records showed regular payments from the architect to various people in your social circle. Venmo transactions with coded descriptions that became obvious once you knew what to look for. PayPal transfers that coincided with major rumors about you. People started admitting they'd been offered money to spy on you. Others revealed they'd been promised social benefits for participating in your isolation. Some confessed they'd been blackmailed into cooperation with threats of having their own secrets exposed. The architect had created a complex web of financial incentives, social pressures, and emotional manipulations designed to turn your entire community against you. They'd weaponized people's insecurities, exploited their loyalties, and corrupted their natural protective instincts. The community investigation revealed something else shocking. You weren't the architect's first target. They'd done this before to other people, with varying degrees of success. There was a pattern of behavior that stretched back years, involving multiple victims and countless manipulated relationships. What started as private conversations among your circle quickly spread beyond it, and the speed at which the truth traveled was breathtaking. People who had been manipulated started talking to others who had been manipulated. The scope of the architect's campaign became clear. They hadn't just targeted your inner circle, they'd reached out to acquaintances, professional contacts, even people who barely knew you. The architect had been running a full-scale reputation assassination campaign that extended into multiple social networks, professional organizations, online communities, and even neighborhood groups. The breadth of their operation was staggering. The architect tried to contain the damage. They offered weak explanations, half-hearted apologies, desperate attempts to redirect blame. They claimed they'd been misunderstood, or trying to help. They suggested their victims were overreacting or misinterpreting their intentions. Nobody was buying it. The evidence was too overwhelming, too detailed, too consistent, across too many sources. The architect's attempts at damage control only made them look more manipulative and pathetic. Professional consequences began immediately. The architect's employer learned about their activities and launched an internal investigation. Professional licenses were reviewed. Business partnerships were terminated. Speaking engagements were cancelled. Social consequences were even more severe. Invitations were rescinded. Friend groups expelled them. Dating prospects rejected them. Even their own family members began distancing themselves as the full scope of their behavior became clear. Your community's response was swift, decisive, and more unified than anyone expected. People don't like being manipulated, and they especially don't like being manipulated into hurting someone innocent. The backlash against the architect was intense and sustained. Social circles that had once welcomed them now viewed them with suspicion and disgust. Professional networks blacklisted them. Community organizations banned them from events. People began sharing their own stories of the architect's manipulation attempts. A pattern emerged of someone who preyed on people's insecurities and exploited their relationships for personal gain. The architect was revealed as a serial manipulator who had damaged countless relationships over the years. Your community didn't just reject the architect, they actively protected others from falling victim to similar manipulation. Warning lists were created, awareness campaigns were launched, educational posts about manipulation tactics were shared widely. The response was so comprehensive that the architect found themselves completely isolated. Friends stopped calling, colleagues became distant, family members questioned their character and motives. They experienced the exact isolation they'd tried to create for you, except this time it was based on documented evidence rather than manufactured drama. The community also rallied around you in ways that surprised everyone. People who had been turned against you became your fiercest defenders. Those who had been manipulated into doubting you became determined to make amends. Your social capital didn't just recover, it multiplied. While the architect's world crumbled, yours began to flourish in ways you never expected. The contrast between your rise and their fall became a powerful testimony to the universe's sense of justice. The people who had been manipulated against you weren't just apologetic, they were protective. They became fierce advocates for your character, your work, your purpose. They'd experienced firsthand how easy it was to be turned against you through clever manipulation, and they were determined never to let it happen again. Your reputation, which had been under attack, emerged stronger than ever. People had seen both your character and the lengths someone would go to destroy it. The contrast was striking and memorable. You were revealed as someone worthy of such an elaborate campaign against you. The attempted character assassination had backfired completely. Instead of diminishing your light, it had created a perfect backdrop against which your authentic self could shine even brighter. The darkness of the attack made your light more visible, not less. As the dust settled, a deeper truth emerged about why you had been targeted. The answer was more profound than simple jealousy or competition. The architect hadn't chosen you randomly. They'd targeted you because of what you represent, the possibility of authentic success, genuine spiritual growth, real positive impact. Your very existence challenged their worldview and their excuses for their own limitations. Chosen ones like you carry a frequency that exposes inauthenticity. Your presence makes it harder for manipulators to operate undetected. Your success proves that their failures aren't inevitable. Your integrity highlights their corruption. The architect had tried to dim your light, not just to hurt you, but to protect their own illusions about what's possible. Your growth threatened their comfortable narrative of victimhood and limitation. Your achievements made their excuses look weak. By attacking you, they'd revealed themselves. By trying to destroy your reputation, they'd destroyed their own. By attempting to isolate you, they'd isolated themselves. The universe had used their own weapon against them with perfect precision. Your ordeal became a teaching moment for everyone involved, and the lessons learned were profound and lasting. People learned to question stories that seemed designed to turn them against someone they care about. They developed better discernment about manipulation tactics. They became more protective of their relationships and more suspicious of those who seem overly interested in other people's business. Your circle learned to value what they'd almost lost. They saw how precious authentic relationships are and how easily they can be damaged by outside manipulation. They developed a deeper appreciation for your character and a stronger commitment to protecting it. Most importantly, they learned that chosen ones like you face unique challenges. Your light attracts both genuine seekers and jealous manipulators. Your success inspires both celebration and sabotage. Your growth triggers both admiration and attack. This experience changed you in profound ways that continue to serve your highest purpose. You learn to trust your intuition even when you can't prove what you're sensing. You developed better boundaries around your energy and information. You became more selective about who gets access to your inner world. Your spiritual gifts strengthened through the trial. Your ability to discern energy, read motivations, and see through facades became razor-sharp. You developed an almost supernatural ability to spot manipulation attempts before they gained traction. Most importantly, you learned that being a chosen one means being a target, and that's perfectly fine. The same light that attracts attacks also attracts protection. The same success that triggers jealousy also inspires genuine celebration. The same growth that threatens some people also encourages others. The Obsidian Inner Order is a sanctuary for those who have walked difficult paths and emerged with wisdom others can't see. We understand that some experiences exist outside the boundaries of what most people consider possible or acceptable to discuss. Every week we gather live on Zoom, real people with real faces sharing real stories without judgment. There's space here for the experiences you've carried in silence, the patterns you've noticed that others dismiss, the intuitive knowledge you've gained through your journey. We don't just listen, we understand. When you're struggling to make sense of your experiences, when you feel gaslit by a world that refuses to acknowledge your reality, you can return to our recorded calls and remember that your perception is valid. Join the Obsidian Inner Order, where your reality is honored and your voice is heard. Link in description. The architect's attempt to destroy you resulted in their own social, professional, and spiritual death. The consequences were more severe than anyone anticipated. They lost credibility, relationships, opportunities, and respect. People who had once valued their opinions now questioned everything they said. Their attempts to play victim only made them look more manipulative and pathetic. They'd burned through their social capital completely. Trust, once lost through manipulation, is nearly impossible to rebuild. They'd revealed themselves as someone willing to lie, scheme and destroy others for personal gain. The isolation they'd tried to create for you became their permanent reality. The reputation they'd tried to destroy became their own fate. The community rejection they'd orchestrated for you became their own experience. Their downfall served as a warning to others who might consider similar tactics. The community had seen what happens to those who target chosen ones, and the lesson was clear: the universe protects its own. Today you stand in a completely different position than when this story began. The transformation has been remarkable and continues to unfold. Your authentic community is stronger than ever. Your reputation is not just restored but enhanced. Your spiritual gifts are sharper, your boundaries clearer, your purpose more focused. You've learned that being targeted is often a sign that you're doing something right. Mediocre people don't inspire elaborate sabotage campaigns. Average individuals don't trigger years-long manipulation schemes. The intensity of the attack was proportional to the threat you represented to the status quo. You understand now that your journey as a chosen one will always include both celebration and attack, support and sabotage, genuine connections and fake friendships. Your role isn't to prevent the attacks, but to trust in your protection and stay true to your purpose. You're not just a survivor of this experience, you're a graduate. You've earned a new level of spiritual authority and social credibility. You've proven that chosen ones can't be broken by manipulation, only strengthened by it. The whispers that started in the dark have been replaced by clear voices speaking your truth in the light. The secret campaign designed to isolate you has resulted in a stronger, more conscious community around you. You've learned the most important lesson of all: when you're aligned with your purpose and protected by divine force, even the most elaborate schemes against you will ultimately serve your highest good. The architect thought they were writing your downfall. Instead, they authored their own destruction and your elevation. Your light burns brighter now, not in spite of what happened, but because of it. Your story has become inspiration for others facing similar attacks. Your experience has become a roadmap for survival and victory. Your transformation has become proof that chosen ones are truly protected, and that truth always wins in the end. The campaign against you failed so spectacularly that it serves as a warning to anyone who might consider targeting a chosen one. Your victory is their defeat, and your light is their darkness exposed.